Now, I may not be the loudest person up here, but I think we've already got that in the White House. Houston, we have a problem.
Money will find its way back in. So what is the answer? The answer is to wash the money out with people-powered money. My proposal is that we give every American 100 democracy dollars that you can only give to candidates and causes that you like.
Now, I had never heard about this before, and I'm really not entirely sure too much about it, but it did remind me of something.
This is a Schrute buck. When you have done something good, you will receive 1 Schrute buck. 1,000. Very good. You have earned 1 Schrute buck.
I don't want it.
Then you have been deducted 50 Schrute bucks.
Make it 100.
Don't you want to earn Schrute bucks?
No, in fact, I'll give you 1 billion Stanley nickels if you never talk to me again.
What's the ratio of Stanley nickels to Schrute bucks?
The same as the ratio of unicorns to leprechauns.
Okay.
That's it. Class is canceled. Everybody out.
No way.
So, I don't know what the ratio of Schrute bucks to government dollars, but I'm pretty sure it's not that great. Now, let's look at Klobuchar, who is trying to establish herself as a moderate, even though that doesn't really exist on this stage.
You're going to hear a lot of ideas up here. Some will be great, but if you see that some of them seem a little off track, I've got a better way. If you feel stuck in the middle of the extremes in our politics and you are tired of the noise and the nonsense, you've got a home with me. Because I don't want to be the president for half of America. I want to be the president for all of America.
So at least she's trying, I guess, to be bipartisan or moderate, even though I don't think she really is. So let's move on to gun control.
In recent days, former Vice President Biden has said about executive orders, some really talented people are seeking the nomination. They said, I'm going to issue an executive order. Biden saying there's no constitutional authority to issue that executive order when they say I'm going to eliminate assault weapons, saying you can't do it by executive order any more than Trump can do things when he says he can do it by executive order. Does the vice president have a point there?
Some things you can, many things you can't.
Let's let the senator answer.
Well, I mean, I would just say, hey, Joe, instead of saying no, we can't, let's say yes, we can.
Let's be constitutional. We got a constitution.
And yes, we can.
So Biden's point that Kamala Harris's obsession with taking away guns through executive order is unconstitutional is a really good point, and he makes that very well. But her response is, let's not focus on what we can't do, but let's just say we can do it. So essentially, ignore the Constitution. I want to do this, so let's do it. And I guess she's forgetting the fact that Democrats won't always be president. So if you set that precedent of just ignoring things and doing whatever you want by executive order, that's not a good way to run a country, because I don't think she would like what Republicans would do with that. So Biden, good on him for pointing out that that is not constitutional.
Over 90% of the American people think we have to get assault weapons off the street, period.
Yeah, so that's not true. A fairly simple search shows you that there was a Rasmussen poll done, and it showed that 62% of people back an assault rifle ban. But that's not 90%. It's a little bit higher than I anticipated, but it's still not what Biden said. Now let's go back to Yang, and this is a point I actually agree with him on, and that is education. Now I did an entire video about education, so I'll link it up here if you want to see it. So I'm just going to show you this clip of Yang that I generally agree with, and then jump back to Beto, who I never agree with on basically anything because he's Beto.
Let me be clear, I am pro-good school. We need to lighten up the emphasis on standardized tests which do not measure anything fundamental about our character or human worth. But here's the big one. The data clearly shows that 65 to 70% of our students' outcomes are determined outside of the school. We're talking about time spent at home with the parents, words read to them when they're young, stress levels in the house, income, type of neighborhood. We're putting money into schools, and educators know this. We're saying you're 100% responsible for educating our kids, but you can only control 30%.
Racism in America is endemic. It is foundational. We can mark the creation of this country not at the 4th of July, 1776, but August 20th, 1619, when the first kidnapped African was brought to this country against his will and in bondage and as a slave, built the greatness and the success and the wealth that neither he nor his descendants would ever be able to fully participate in and enjoy. and sign into law a reparations bill that will allow us to address this at its foundations.
Yeah, nothing says vote for me like America has always been and is still a racist country. Now, he said a lot of nonsense in there. First and foremost, reparations are not popular, no matter how you look at it. As a matter of fact, only 21% of voters support it. 66% oppose it, and the other 13 aren't really sure. So reparations is not a very good policy to propose because, again, it's just not supported. Also, the idea that is consistently pushed by the Democrats that America was founded on racism and white supremacy, it's nonsense. It's not backed up by data and by the truth. Racism was a big part of our country, don't get me wrong. But to try and say that America is flourishing because of racism and because of slavery, that just doesn't make sense. Now, unlike the previous debates, they didn't really spend much time talking about immigration and decriminalizing crossing the border, which is probably good for them because it doesn't look good when you talk about open borders. But Elizabeth Warren did talk about something that I kind of want to highlight here, and that's when asking about Dreamers and DACA. And I think this is important.
Create a pathway to citizenship for our Dreamers, but also for their grandparents and for their cousins, for people who overstayed student visas.
So basically, every Dreamer and their dog and their cousin's dog and every family member they've ever had should get a pathway to citizenship. Now, if you want to argue about Dreamers specifically, then you can make that argument and we can have a discussion on that. But their cousins? Like, what is the relevance there? You being here means now your cousin and your grandparents can automatically come here as well? I just don't see it.
In the last 45 years, the average American today, despite an explosion of technology and worker productivity, is not making a penny more than he or she made 45 years ago. And one of the reasons is that for decades we have had disastrous trade policies.
So I don't know where Bernie is finding his statistics because that is not accurate whatsoever. So here you can see quite obviously that over the past 50 years, income has increased by quite a bit. And this is obviously accounting for inflation. And so 45 years ago was 1974, and we are making significantly more on average than they did 45 years ago. So Bernie is flat out wrong. I don't know why he thought that was an accurate statistic because it's obviously not. Now we're going to jump back to the first issue they talked about, and that was healthcare. And I saved this more towards the end because I thought it was a really good segment, and believe it or not, Biden kind of rocked it. Now, I'm not saying this because I agree with what he said, but he was single-handedly taking on both Sanders and Warren at the same time, and I think he was winning. This is probably the best Biden that has happened in this campaign whatsoever, and props for him on this. Again, I don't really agree with what he said, but it's still kind of nice to see Warren and Sanders.
Are Senators Warren and Sanders pushing too far beyond where Democrats want to go and where the country needs to go?
That'll be for the voters to decide that question. Let me tell you what I think. I think we should have a debate on health care. I know that the senator says she's for Bernie. Well, I'm for Barack. I think the Obamacare worked. I think the way in which we add to it, replace everything that's been cut, add a public option, guarantee that everyone will be able to have affordable insurance, number one. Number two, I think we should be in a position of taking a look at what costs are. My plan for health care costs a lot of money. It costs $740 billion. It doesn't cost $30 trillion. $3.4 trillion a year, it turns out, is twice what the entire federal budget is. That's before it exists now, without interest on the debt. How are we going to pay for it? I want to hear tonight how that's happened. So as far, my distinguished friend, the senator on my left, has not indicated how she pays for it. And the senator has, in fact, come forward and said how he's going to pay for it, but it gets him about halfway there.
In response to this, they actually ask Warren how she is going to pay for it and if there's going to be a tax raise. So this is what she says.
Middle-class taxes are going to go up, and most of private insurance is going to be eliminated. Will you make that same admission?
How do we pay for it? We pay for it. Those at the very top, the richest individuals and the biggest corporations, are going to pay more. And middle-class families are going to pay less. That's how this is going to work.
Direct question. You said middle-class families are going to pay less, but will middle-class taxes go up to pay for the program? I know you believe that the deductibles and the premiums will go down. Will middle-class taxes go up? Will private insurance be eliminated?
Look, what families have to deal with is cost.
So twice she avoided the question. And the answer is yes, taxes will go up for everybody. And yes, she wants to ban or eliminate private insurance. So she avoided it twice, but the answers are yes. Now Bernie is asked the same question, and as you can imagine, he responds in the same way, by actually not responding, but by shifting the narrative. So after both of them failed to respond, Biden came back and he hit pretty hard.
Number one. Number two, the fact of the matter is we're in a situation where, if you notice, he hadn't answered the question. This is about candor, honesty, big ideas. Well, let's have a big idea. The tax of 2% that the senator's talking about, that raises about $3 billion. Guess what? That leaves you about $28 billion short. The senator said before it's going to cost you in your pay. There will be a deductible in your paycheck. You're going to.
Now that's pretty catchy, I think, that Medicare for All does come with deductibles. They're just in your paycheck. So that's a pretty good point to make for Biden. Now, not to be outdone, Klobuchar decided to come out of nowhere and kind of jump on the bandwagon of attacking Sanders.
And while Bernie wrote the bill, I read the bill. And on page 8 of the bill, it says that we will no longer have private insurance as we know it. And that means that 149 million Americans will no longer be able to have their current insurance.
And she brings up a really good point. That is that under these Medicare for All plans, private insurance would not exist. You are not allowed to have private insurance at all. And believe it or not, most people like their private insurance. A Gallup poll found that about 69% like their coverage and 80% like the quality of healthcare that they receive. So private insurance, despite what Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren may try to tell you, is actually fairly well liked. And if you implement Medicare for All, you are no longer allowed to have that insurance. Now, Harris jumps in and talks about how she supports keeping private insurance, even though she's flipped on this several times now, but she also decides to come in and kind of attack Bernie Sanders' plan.
Support Medicare for All, I always have, but I wanted to make the plan better, which I did, which is about offering people choice, not taking that from them. So under my Medicare for All plan, people have the choice of a private plan or a public plan because that's what people want.
And if you notice, nobody's yet said how much it's going to cost the taxpayer. I hear this large savings. The president my friend from Vermont thinks that the employer is going to give you back if you negotiate his union all these years, got a cut in wages because you got insurance. They're going to give back that money to the employee?
Matter of fact, they will.
Well, let me tell you something. For a socialist, you got a lot more confidence in corporate America than I do.
So Biden comes back in and points out that still they have not talked about how they're going to pay for their plans, which I think is a good point. And then he accidentally almost calls Bernie president, which was kind of weird and hopefully not some form of prophecy that he received. But then I really like how he addresses Sanders and calls him a socialist because that's pretty funny. And I'm surprised he wasn't called out for using a Republican talking point because that happened a lot in the last debate.
500,000 Americans are going bankrupt. You know why they're going bankrupt? Because they suffered a terrible disease, cancer or heart disease.
Now, I've already debunked that in a video I made where I fact-checked what Bernie Sanders said in the Joe Rogan podcast, so that'll be linked up there if you want to check it out. Now we're going to jump back to Yang because he has a very important message on how to legally bribe people to vote for you.
I'm going to do something unprecedented tonight. My campaign will now give a freedom dividend of $1,000 a month for an entire year to 10 American families, someone watching this at home right now. If you believe that you can solve your own problems better than any politician, go to yang2020.com and tell us how $1,000 a month will help you do just that. This is how we will get our country working for us again.
Mayor Pete Buttigieg.
It's original, I'll give you that.
I'm not even upset about this. Just the look on Pete Buttigieg's face where he didn't know what to say or what to do, that was priceless right there. Now, look, I don't really support the freedom dividend, but if it's not coming from taxpayers, it's instead coming from Yang's pocket or his campaign, then I see no problem with it. If you want to take advantage of it, go ahead and do it. But basically what we have here is him, like I said, low-key bribing people to vote for him. And it's a completely legal way, so good for you, Yang. All right, now we're going to see one more mistake by Biden before we take off.
Play the radio. Make sure the television, make sure you have the record player on at night, the phone. Make sure the kids hear words.
So apparently he forgot what decade and even what century we're in. Now, of course, people still have record players, but you're much less likely to put music on your record player than you are your, iPhone or Amazon Echo or whatever else. So he is still kind of behind the times here. Now, that is all that I had for this video. I hope you enjoyed it and I hope it was educational. You learned something from the debate, and now you don't have to watch it because here you go. This is all the important stuff. You don't need to see anything more. Make sure you check out one of my other videos before you go. Subscribe and hit the notification bell if you haven't already. And just thank you for watching. I hope to see you next time.